I helped my best friend hide her affair for almost a year, until I realized the man she was betraying was my own brother. I used to think loyalty was something you were born with, not something you learned. It felt embedded in me long before adulthood, an instinct I carried without questioning. If someone trusted me, I became a vault. If someone leaned on me, I stayed upright no matter the weight. That belief shaped how I lived and eventually how I failed. Lena entered my life during a period when everything felt unstable but quiet. I had relocated to Ashford Point, a coastal neighborhood in Briarwood City, after years of drifting between commitments that never held. The area was subdued, made of narrow streets and old buildings that still carried the memory of better days. It was the kind of place people chose when they needed to disappear without fully leaving. We met in a shared office loft, above a closed-down textile factory. It wasn't friendship at first, it was familiarity. We worked similar hours, took breaks at the same time, and shared the same unspoken understanding that personal history stayed off the table. Over months, familiarity turned into reliance. When Lena finally told me her marriage was unraveling, she did it carefully, not with accusations or anger, but with exhaustion. She spoke as someone who had already mourned the relationship and was now carrying its remains. I listened without interruption, interpreting her restraint as maturity rather than avoidance. She said she had tried everything. She said she felt invisible. She said she had made a decision she never expected to make. I didn't ask what that decision was. Support came naturally at first. I offered presence, then space, then silence. She began spending time at my apartment near Crestline Wharf, a place I had chosen precisely because it felt temporary. I convinced myself I was giving her refuge, not cover. Over time, the requests shifted. They became specific, time-sensitive, strategically vague. I started adjusting my routines to accommodate hers, telling myself it was temporary, that this phase would pass once she figured out her life. She became meticulous in ways that unsettled me. Every movement was intentional, every excuse rehearsed. She spoke about privacy as if it were survival. I noticed how rarely she seemed anxious anymore, while I grew increasingly uneasy. The lies I told on her behalf never felt dramatic. They felt administrative, simple distortions of truth that slid into place without resistance. I began to understand how people justify things they would once condemn. I avoided asking questions because answers would demand action. Silence allowed me to remain helpful without becoming responsible. Weeks became months. Her emotional weight lifted while mine deepened. I started waking with a tightness in my chest I couldn't explain. Still, I told myself I was separate from the betrayal. I wasn't the one breaking vows. I was just making it easier. The truth didn't arrive as chaos. It arrived disguised as routine. I was walking through Northvale Galleria, a sprawling complex near Hollis Square, killing time before meeting my brother Owen for lunch. The afternoon felt slow, almost dull. I remember thinking how rare it was to feel bored instead of burdened. That was when I saw Lena. She wasn't guarded, she wasn't careful, she looked free in a way I had never seen. The man beside her stood close, not protectively, but familiarly. When he turned his head, recognition struck with such force that my body reacted before my mind could. It was Owen, my younger brother. The person who had shared every major moment of my life. The person whose wedding I had attended at Redmere Hall. Standing close enough to see the vows, etched into his expression. In that instant, memory rearranged itself violently. Every late night, every absence, every unexplained shift in behavior. The realization wasn't gradual, it was complete. I hadn't been unaware, I had been useful. I didn't confront either of them immediately. I entered a strange state of observation, watching patterns align with terrifying precision. I noticed how Owen avoided mentioning his home life. I noticed how Lena's timelines perfectly matched his disappearances. I noticed how often I had been positioned as a buffer, a solution, a neutral ground. The most painful realization wasn't the affair itself. It was understanding that my role had been intentional. My proximity provided safety. My trust created cover. My silence sustained everything. When the truth finally surfaced, it didn't explode. It collapsed. Quietly, thoroughly, relationships didn't end. They dissolved. Lena vanished from my life without confrontation. Owen remained, but only as a distant obligation. Family gatherings became sparse and strained. Conversations felt edited, cautious, incomplete. I learned that neutrality doesn't exist when harm is involved. There is only participation or resistance. I had chosen participation. Time didn't bring clarity, it brought distance. Invitations stopped arriving. Holidays became logistical rather than emotional. I noticed how easily absence rewrites history. My apartment near Crestline Wharf became unbearable. Every object carried memory. Every quiet moment echoed with choices I couldn't undo. I stopped offering help that required secrecy. I stopped believing silence was kindness. Some nights I replay every moment where curiosity could have interrupted comfort. One question, one refusal, one line drawn. I didn't lose my brother in one act of betrayal. I lost him gradually, through accumulated silence. There are betrayals that shatter relationships, and then there are betrayals that dismantle who you believe yourself to be. I didn't break vows, but I protected the breaking of them. I didn't lie out of love, but out of convenience. I once believed loyalty meant standing beside someone no matter what. Now I understand that real loyalty demands risk, discomfort, and the willingness to disappoint. The cost of my silence wasn't immediate. It was permanent. Some consequences don't arrive loudly. They settle into your life and become the shape of what remains. Thank you for listening to my story.